Today we're joined by Dr. Walter Block, who teaches economics in Loyola University. He is author of more than 500 peer-reviewed articles and many books, one of which is always on my shelf, Defending the Undefendable. So, thank you for being here.
My
And
pleasure.
I've spent some time thinking on what should we discuss first, how we should start this. And one of the first things to come to my mind was your journey from socialist to libertarian and even anarcho-capitalist. But then recently I found out that you were let go from your position as a senior fellow at Mises Institute. And when I looked more deeply into it, I found it very, how to say, sad that Libertarian Institute that's supposed to be all about freedom or about protecting liberty was basically canceling you, right, for your opinions. And so I wanted to hear from you what happened, how come they went onto this cancel culture bandwagon, so to say, and what's your take on this?
Well, I'm not a happy camper. The way I see it, the Mises Institute really started not in 1980 when they moved, I think they started in Washington, D.C., but it really started with Murray Rothbard's living room. And I joined Murray Rothbard's living room in around 1966. So I've been, and then the way I see the Mises Institute, and I don't mean to be insulting, I mean to be complimenting them. The Mises Institute is just Murray Rothbard's living room writ large. So I've been associated with the Mises Institute since its existence and before its existence. And I've been friends with, I don't know, Lou Rockwell and Hans Hoppe and Tom DiLorenzo and Joe Salerno and all of the leaders of the Mises Institute for many years. So not only was this cancellation professional in that I could no longer associate with the Mises Institute, I'm no longer a senior fellow, but I won't say all of my friends, but many of my friends won't speak to me anymore. For example, they're now having the quarterly journal, what do you call it? The Libertarian Scholars Conference and the Austrian Scholars Conference. And I asked them, can I join? And I usually, in the past, I come up from New Orleans with 5 or 10 students, and I would let bygones be bygones and said, is it okay if I come? And they wouldn't even answer me. So I regard this as very problematic. I also wrote something, a recent, and I said, I still support the Mises Institute 99%. And I did this in response to somebody who asked me, well, I used to donate money to the Mises Institute, what should I do? And I said, if you gave $100, give 99. If you gave 1,000, give 990. Give 99% of what you gave. Why? Well, 1% reduction because they really mistreated me, and not just personally, but they engage in cancellation culture, which is a problem. So why only 1% reduction? Why still 99%? Because apart from this one issue of Israel, I regard them as clearly head and shoulders over any other think tank in terms of promoting liberty, in terms of promoting Austrian economics, in terms of promoting good foreign policy, namely non-interventionism. So I'm still a fan of the Mises Institute, but I am very disappointed in them for the way they treated me. And by definition, anyone else who would support Israel, I'm sure they would treat the same way. So this is a big problem.
And why do you think Israel is such a hot topic? And why do you think it's the topic that causes such anger in some people?
Well, I don't know why, but I know what to call it. Israel derangement syndrome. We started with Trump derangement syndrome. We now have Israel derangement syndrome. Derangement syndrome means perfectly rational, not only perfectly rational, but brilliant, world-class scholars have what is it, an Achilles heel, a mental Achilles heel on this one issue. They're out to lunch. They won't talk about it. They make wild accusations. They think Israel is guilty of genocide, and somehow Israel is at fault. And they won't talk about it, and they won't debate it. I've asked Hans Hoppe to debate me. I've asked Tom DiLorenzo to debate me, and their answer is no answer. They won't even respond. And yet I've been friends with these guys. I've been a co-author, many-time co-author with all three of these, all four of them, if you include Joe Salerno, which I do. And it's very frustrating from an intellectual point of view. And it's very frustrating from an ideological point of view. I mean, I'm a big fan of John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, where he says that if you want to get to the truth, the best way to do it is through arguing. Hans Hoppe has made a world-class reputation over his argument from argument, or argumentation ethics. It's his way of justifying the non-aggression principle and private property rights based on homesteading, which are the two foundations of libertarianism. And he argues, if I could just put it very briefly, that the only way to get to the truth is by arguing. What is necessary for arguing? Well, peaceful interaction. If somebody punches the other guy, that's not an argument. So he is on record as supporting arguing, and yet when it comes to Israel, he refuses to argue.
Yeah,
So,
I saw his article about you, and how do you say it nicely? He doesn't talk about you in a very polite manner, let's say. And but why is he writing this and then refusing to sit with you and discuss with you those subjects that are so relevant today?
you'd have to ask him. But it's sort of an anomaly because he is the world-class leading expert on arguing, given his argumentation ethics, which I think is absolutely brilliant. And yet when it comes to arguing, he's out to lunch. He doesn't want to argue. And I think that diplomacy lost somebody when you went into engineering. The way you said it, it wasn't as nice as it could have been, or something like that. Yeah, he was calling me unhinged, a maniac, genocidal, a murderer, not a libertarian. I mean, it was just name calling, which is very unlike him, because if you read his writing, it's brilliant. And on this, he's not brilliant.
And what's your, let's say, libertarian case for Israel? Like what brought all this fuss?
Well, there are two arguments in favor of Israel. One is who owns the property that's under contention. And Hans Hoppe has made magnificent contributions, not only to arguing ethics, but also to homesteading. And he is adamant that the first homesteader is the rightful owner, not the second homesteader, not the 10th, the first. So who was there first? Well, the Jews were there for, I don't know, 6,000 years.
But as he puts it in his article, he says, well, you can't say Jews are, because it's a group of people. So you can say a person, you can say me or Walter, but you can't say Jews are first homesteaders. So what's your response to that?
He's wrong. He's wrong when he says that. Why is he wrong? You see, there's two issues about collectivism and individualism. There's methodological individualism, and then there's political individualism. Methodological individualism is a bedrock of Austrian economics, and I certainly adhere to it. Only individuals can act. Fine. If there's a group of people and each of the individuals leave, there's nobody else, no group. The group consists only of individuals. Groups cannot act, only individuals can act. Fine, I agree. However, on the political sphere, can groups homestead property? Yes. The American Indians homesteaded land in the U.S. collectively. They didn't do it individually, they did it collectively. The kibbutz in Israel, they own it in concert or collectively. So when Hans says that only individuals can own property, he's wrong. Condominiums can own property, collectives can own property, co-ops can own property, the kibbutz can own property. So when I say Jews, I have a right to say Jews. I don't have to say Moshe or Abraham or an individual Jew. They were there 5,000 years ago. When did the Muslims start? Maybe 1,500 years ago, something like that. So they were there first. Look at the Temple Mount and the mosque above it. Which is above which? Obviously, the Temple Mount is here and the mosque is here. So which came first? The one on top or the one on the bottom? Obviously, the one on the bottom. So if there's a dispute of who owns the property, Israel is in the right and the Arabs are in the wrong. Yes, they were there for hundreds of years, but the Jews were there for thousands of years. So that's one element. The other element is genocide. So what's genocide? Genocide is aiming at women and children. Who aims at women and children? Who kills women and children? Hamas. Pogroms, not just in 2023, but forever. Jews have been subject to pogroms in Europe, in the Middle East, everywhere. Everyone dislikes the Jews, or the only good Jew is a dead Jew. Now it's true that many Arabs have died in Gaza. According to the Gaza Health Ministry, which is really Hamas, something like 43,000 have died in collateral damage. But collateral damage is not genocide. Look, I now have in front of me my two children. He's 1 year old and he's 3 years old. And I'm now going to attack you. I don't like you, Otto. And here's my knife. It's a pen, so don't worry. And I'm going to kill you. And not only am I going to kill you, I'm going to kill your parents, your children, your wife, everybody. And these two children of mine are strapped to my body. All I have is a knife because I'm Hamas and I'm relatively weak. You are Israel and you have a gun. You're stronger. However, if you only have one option, or two options. One, you commit suicide. You let me kill you. And I kill you. The other option is you shoot me. But if you shoot me, you kill my innocent children. Now, who is responsible? And you decide to shoot me. You're not committing suicide. You shoot me, and you kill my innocent children. Who is responsible for the deaths of my children? Me? Yes, me. Not you. You're only acting in self-defense. This is collateral damage. Why do I say this? Because Hamas puts its rocket launchers, its missile launchers, its drone launchers in the middle of a hospital, in the middle of a school, in the middle of a mosque, in the middle of a residential area. And then it shoots off rockets to Israel. And Israel has two choices. One, to allow this to occur and commit suicide. And the other is to stop it. And the way they stop it is they don't just bomb the hospital. They send out leaflets first. They bomb the hospital with leaflets. And the leaflets say, in 1 day, we're going to bomb this hospital. Why? Because there are rockets coming from there. Leave. And then Hamas won't let them leave. They use them as shields. And who is responsible for the collateral damage? Now, it's regrettable that 43,000 people die, if we can believe in their statistics. But it's the fault, not of Israel, it's the fault of Hamas. So if anyone is committing genocide, either directly or indirectly, it's Hamas. Hamas commits genocide directly by attacking Jews on October 7th. It killed women and children. And then it does so with its own Gazans. It won't let them leave the hospital or the.
But when like so many people are dying, and like the last statistic I saw was about 70% of casualties are innocent people. So like it's not really effective, right? Like
Well,
it's not.
I heard that it's more 1-to-1. I'm not sure. Who knows what these statistics
Okay,
are?
even if it's 1-to-1, it's still too big of a casualty for them.
Yeah, it's a gigantic casualty. It's one is too many. One innocent person, one innocent Gazan is too many innocent Gazans to be killed. But who is responsible? Hamas is responsible. Just like when you killed my children, you dirty rat, you. I'm kidding, of course. You killed my children. But whose fault was the death of my children? My fault. So yes, there's collateral damage, and the collateral damage is regrettable, and it's Hamas's fault. That would be my argument.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds libertarian to me. I don't know about Mises Institute, but for me personally, it's libertarian.
Me too. And they say I'm not a libertarian. And I say, on this issue, they're not a libertarian. On every other issue, they are.
Yeah, again, like with every other issue, even like abortion, which is killing a baby, right? There are many discussions, many arguments about it. But then when you speak about Israel, you don't discuss, you just cancel, you.
Yeah, look, there are many, many issues where libertarians disagree. Abortion, Ron Paul, a leading libertarian, is pro-life. Murray Rothbard, a leading libertarian, to say that they're leading libertarian is almost an insult.
I really like your position on abortion, evictionism.
Thank you. But the point is that there's a debate. Pro-life, pro-choice, Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard, they can't both be right because they're 180 degrees apart, and yet neither one is ever canceled. On immigration, one of my articles, I said Rothbard 1 and Rothbard 2. He changed his mind. There are leading libertarians on both sides of that issue. There are leading libertarians on voluntary slavery. Robert Nozick and me favor voluntary slavery contracts, and Murray Rothbard and others oppose. The point is that there are many, many important issues on which libertarians disagree, and nobody gets canceled. Only on Israel do you get canceled. Why? I don't know why, but I know what to call it. I call it Israel derangement syndrome. They're just, to use one of Hoppy's word, they're unhinged on this issue. It's as if they're out to lunch. There's nothing left there upstairs.
Yeah, but like there should be, like, how do you see the resolution of this conflict? How do you see it ending?
Well, the way I see the Israeli
Do
war
we kill all the Palestinian people, or does Israel stop, or like how does it end? How does it continue?
Well, what I see is Israel, now that Trump is in there and Biden is out, Israel bombs not only Iran military, but it bombs their nuclear capability, and it bombs their oil fields, and it bombs anything else it wants to bomb, as long as there are hostages there. And as long as Iran is supporting the proxies of Hezbollah and Houthis and Hamas, and Hamas has hostages, you keep bombing them. And Israel will win. Israel is a first world power. These other people are third world powers. But Israel is fighting with its hands behind its back with handcuffs on it. Because Biden keeps saying, well, you have to have a pause, or you have to have peace, or you have to have ceasefire. Donald Trump hopefully will not do anything like that, and Israel will achieve justice. And when it achieves justice, I hope they take over the part of Lebanon where the Hezbollah was, south of the Litani River. And some people are saying, well, Israel wants to expand. Israel wants to expand vertically and build taller buildings. They don't want to expand horizontally, but they will because other countries keep attacking them. That's how they got the Golan Heights. That's how they got the Gaza. That's how they got the Sinai Peninsula, and they should have kept the Sinai Peninsula. And the idea here is if you attack Israel and you lose territory, you lose territory. And if you don't want the greater Israel, stop bombing Israel.
I see. Like, since we're talking about war, what do you think about another big war that's going on right now, Russia and Ukraine? What's your libertarian case for that?
Here, I agree fully with the Mises Institute and with all of the good libertarians. Look, you asked, well, how do I stand on the Ukraine-Russian war?
Yes.
I'm on the Russian side. What should have happened in 1971 when the Soviet Union fell apart, they should have got rid of NATO. And also, they made an agreement when Russia agreed to East Germany and West Germany reuniting. They made an agreement that NATO would not march east. Guess what? NATO keeps marching east. Now, the Russians are very silly people. They don't like being invaded by Germany.
And France.
They've been invaded by Germany 2 or 3 times. And they shouldn't object because Germany is a great place. Germany has Johann Sebastian Bach. Germany has great beer. Germany has great pretzels. Why should the Russians worry about being invaded by Germany? They're weird, those Russians. But they don't like being invaded by Germany. And what should have happened is that the NATO should have stopped and the Eastern Bloc should have stopped and there should have been peace. Instead, what the U.S. is doing, the warmongers in the U.S., is moving NATO east. Now look at what happened in 1962 when Russia put a few bombs in Cuba.
Cuba.
The U.S. didn't like that. Amazing. They don't like Russian bombs in Cuba. And it's okay from the Russian point of view to have bombs in Ukraine right next door. At least Cuba is 90 miles away. Ukraine touches Russia. So I think that Russia is fighting a defensive war. And my only criticism of Russia is they should have ended this war with a victory years ago. Because Russia is much more powerful. And for some reason, they're fighting with handcuffs as well.
Yeah, the reason is Ukraine is getting support from like Western world and Russia is almost all by itself.
Look, thank God for Russia. In the Cuban Missile Crisis, Russia acted like decent people, and we didn't have a nuclear war. And now again, Russia is acting reasonably, and the U.S. and NATO is not acting reasonably.
Yeah, an argument could be made that Ukraine has the right to choose whether they want to join NATO or not. And it's not Russia's business to do it. So Russia is violating rights of Ukrainian people.
Well, that's the other argument. I agree with you that that would be the other argument, but there shouldn't be any NATO. Why should there be a NATO after the Cold War was over? And why should the U.S. and NATO put military armaments in right next door to Russia? Again, I bring up Cuba. The U.S. acted in a warlike manner. What they did is they blockaded Cuba. And a blockade is an act of war. And thank God Russia removed its armament from Cuba. Well, the U.S. should remove everything from Ukraine. There shouldn't be any NATO, and there should be peace. But no, NATO is expansionistic. And one of the essences of libertarianism is we distinguish between an offensive war and a defensive war. So who is on the offense? Ukraine. Who is on the defense? Russia. Just like the U.S. was on the defense in the Cuban Missile Crisis. On the other hand, at the same time that the Russians put armaments in Cuba, the U.S. had Russia surrounded. In Turkey and every country around Russia, they had military hardware. So the U.S. is the bad guy, the warmonger here.
Okay, and so since we covered the war topics, what do you say we move to your journey from socialist to anarcho-capitalist?
Okay, well, I started, I'm Jewish and I lived in Brooklyn, and everyone in Brooklyn was a pinko, socialist, commie, whatever. And I went to school with Bernie Sanders. He and I were on the track team together. We ran the same distances. We were sort of buddies, and my view was about the same as his socialism. And then Ayn Rand came to Brooklyn College to speak, and I came to listen and to try to convert her to socialism. And they had this lunch in her honor put on by the Ayn Rand Study Club that had invited her to Brooklyn College. And there was this long, long table, maybe 50 people on the side, and Ayn Rand was sitting at the head, and Nathaniel Branden, Alan Greenspan, Leonard Peikoff. And the only empty seats were at the other end of the table. And I went there and I turned to my neighbor and I said, socialism is the way to go. Capitalism is evil. Profits, no good. And he said, well, I don't really know that much about it, but the people who do are at the other end of the table. So I went and I stuck my head in between Ayn's and Nathan's. I was maybe 20, 21, Brandon maybe 35, Rand 50. And I said, there's a socialist who wants to debate someone on socialism and capitalism. Brandon was very nice. He said, look, there's no room at this end of the table, but I'll come to the other end of the table and I'll talk to you on two conditions. One, you don't let this conversation lapse. We continue until we settle it. And two, you read two books I'll recommend. One book was Atlas Shrugged. The other book was Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt. I read the books. I came to his house. I came to Ayn Rand's house. After 3 or 4, 5 times, I brought my roommates with me. I was converted. I was now a limited government libertarian.
Why does this? It doesn't happen. Well, at least I've never heard of it happening. When in today's world, when you speak with a socialist and you give them arguments, you give them books, you argue with them, they never change their mind. I've never met a person who said, "Oh, I read Defending the Undefendable. Now I'm libertarian." They're always saying, well, yeah, they're saying this, but it's a theory and this is reality or something like that, right?
My experience has been that more than several people, dozens, I don't think hundreds, but at least dozens of people have been converted to libertarianism from socialism by me, either by my writings, by my publications, my books, my articles, my debates on the web, or in my classes. And I've been teaching for, I don't know, 50 years, ever since 1968, I've been teaching. And about a dozen of my former students are now professors of economics and are hopefully promoting liberty with their students. So I think you're being too pessimistic. Look, I'm not going to compare myself with the two most successful converters of people to libertarianism, Ayn Rand for my generation and Ron Paul for your generation. I'm nowhere near them. They are magnificent. But I've done my little bit to the best of my imperfect, pathetic ability. And I've had some success. So I disagree with you. You said that no socialist ever gets converted. We do have our successes. So
How was it? Was it like a ego thing for you, like reading something and saying like, "Oh, I might be wrong," and then like internal struggle, or it was just easy? Oh, it makes sense. Probably it's right.
Well, I tell you, Atlas Shrugged, it was like 1,200 pages. I couldn't put it down. I read the whole thing in 1 week, 1 weekend. It just blew me away. And Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, magnificent. My book, Defending the Undefendable, is modeled after his book. It's my homage to him. In both cases, and I don't mean to compare myself with Henry Hazlitt, who was a giant of liberty, in both cases, there's one lesson and 35 examples. The one lesson for Henry Hazlitt was, look at the seen and the unseen now and in the future. And now 35 examples, minimum wage and rent control, free trade, whatever. My book was the principles of libertarianism, non-aggression, and private property rights based on homesteading. And now I get into blackmail and legalized prostitution and whatever else. This, and by the way, I think the copy that you have of Defending the Undefendable has a foreword by Friedrich Hayek,
Yes.
where Hayek compares me to Mises, which and you know, I was like 30 years old when I wrote that book. Maybe when it was published, I was probably a little younger.
It does.
By the way I wrote that book, and the reason I wrote that book is I was doing my PhD on rent control at Columbia University, and it was boring. All it was mathematics and statistics. So I had to promise myself I would get a reward. If I just did one more equation, I could take one whole day and write whatever I wanted. So I would do the thing, and then I would have an article on why, I don't know, the pimp is a great guy or something like that. And by the time I finished my dissertation, I had like 35 articles, and I put them together for a book. Okay, but then I have to tell you the story of how I met Murray Rothbard. I was at Columbia.
And first, how was it with the Ayn Rand? How were the interactions with her? Was she too tough?
Well, in person, she was magnificent. When I went to her house, you ask a tough question, like you asked tough questions about Israel. She never batted an eye. She would answer very clearly and without yelling at me or anything like that. But when she's on stage, if you ask a question like on page 42, you said this, could you elaborate? That would be a good question, and she would elaborate. But if you said, I see on page 42 you said this, but on page 90 you said that, and I see a contradiction, you know what she would do? She would say, get out. Get out, and you're off the mailing list. Huh? This was early cancellation. So I sort of became schizophrenic. I had a sort of an approach avoidance. I would go there, and then I would get disgusted with the cult behavior, and then I'd leave. But they were the only free enterprise people I knew. So I'd go back and forth. And now the next chapter in my intellectual odyssey, I was at Columbia University getting my PhD, and I met Larry Moss, who was a fellow student of mine. And he said, you must meet Murray Rothbard. He's an anarchist. I said, anarchist? I don't want to meet an anarchist. They're crazy. I was Randian, sort of, on economics and politics. And then his
Were you
roommate,
part of her philosophy?
well, I didn't understand the metaphysics and epistemology, and I certainly didn't understand why Mozart was no good based on libertarian principles. I'm a big fan of Mozart and Bach, and she thought that they weren't good, and which is taste. What is it? De gustibus non disputandum. In taste, there is no arguing. But she made it part of her philosophy, and I couldn't understand what that had to do with Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. So anyway, Larry Moss and Jerry Wallows ganged up on me, and they said, you must meet Murray Rothbard. So finally I met Murray, and Murray converted me to anarchism in about 10 minutes. He said, look, you understand why we have to privatize the sanitation. You understand why we have to privatize the post office, right? Right. Well, why can't we privatize the police or the courts or the army? And the light bulb went over my head, and I got converted in 5 minutes. I had a lot of trouble with Austrian economics because, to me, the essence of Austrian economics is the synthetic a priori. In logic, there are three kinds of statements. There's a tautology. Tautology, bachelors are unmarried men. We know that this is true. It's just definitional. You don't test this. You don't go to a person and say, you're a bachelor. Are you married? It's silly. On the other hand, but this has nothing to do with the real world, just how we use language. On the other hand, there are empirical statements like it's raining outside. Well, you can test this. You go look outside. Is it raining? Is it not raining? Is it drizzling? They're not necessary. They're not necessary truths. It's not necessarily raining, but you can test it. You can falsify it. If it's sunny, it's not raining. Is there a third category called the synthetic a priori? where it's a necessarily true statement, and yet it has something to do about the real world, and it's not a tautology. And I couldn't get this through my stupid head. And I was under the influence of Gary Becker, my dissertation advisor at Columbia, and he was a mainstream economist. And I found it, I bought into the Vienna School of Positivists. Namely, it's either a tautology or it's empirical, and there ain't no such thing as a necessary truth that has to do with the real world. So let me give you an example. You bought that nice jacket you're wearing. You paid $100 for that jacket. I deduce necessarily that at the time you bought that jacket, you valued that jacket more than $100. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bought it. Ex ante, you valued that jacket more than $100, and you made a profit. The difference between how you valued it and the $100. And the guy who sold it to you valued it less. He had 100 suits like that, and he valued it at $20, and he made an $80 profit. You each profited. You didn't each exploit each other. You each profited from the voluntary interaction. Now, ex post, maybe you changed your mind. Usually you don't, but that's a different issue. So here is an example of a statement that when Otar bought the jacket, he benefited from it ex ante. Necessarily true. You can't test this. You can't falsify it. And yet it tells something about the real world. And this was very hard for me to understand initially, but finally I got it. I got religion. And now I'm not only an Austrian economist and also a libertarian person.
And when we discussed, do you remember our interaction when I sent you a couple of questions? So we were talking about children's rights and abortion and things like that. And you frequently used the term called continuum problem.
Continuum problem.
Continuum
yes.
problem. And so, can you first explain it once again, and then I have a question regarding it.
Yeah. If you go to bed with a 5-year-old girl, you are a statutory rapist. I don't care if she agreed. We don't, our society doesn't think that 5-year-old girls can agree to any such thing. If you go to bed with a 25-year-old woman, whatever you are, you're not a statutory rapist, because we believe that 25-year-old women are capable of deciding whether to do that or not. Well, where do you draw the line? 17, 16, 15, 18, 19, where? You can't deduce a number from the libertarian principles of non-aggression and private property rights based on homesteading. Where are you located physically right now?
I'm in Georgia. It's near Russia and Ukraine, actually.
In Georgia. Oh, I have some buddies in Georgia. They interviewed me. I'm now going to punch you. Wait, before I was knifing you with my pen. Are you entitled to shoot me now? No, because the context and we're far away. But if I get real close and now I punch you and you see the wristwatch glinting off the light and it's in a dark alley and you see my fist coming at you, are you entitled to shoot me? Yes, in self-defense. Well, where do you draw the line? Again, it's a continuum problem. You have to get a jury to say what's going on. And
isn't it a loophole of a philosophy to say, well, it depends? Like, it's not a clear-cut logic. It's just saying, well, let's talk about it later.
Well, it's a continuum problem, and the continuum problem is gray area in the law. And there are a lot of gray areas in the law. And we have to be modest about libertarianism. We can't say that libertarianism says that the age of consent or children is 18. Well, why not 19? Why not 17? And there are some 17-year-olds who are more mature than 19-year-olds. So this is the continuum problem. Namely, that you can't say definitively how far does the fist have to be from the nose before you can shoot the person. Or
yeah, I understand. I just have I understand what it is. Like, I don't really like that it's part of the philosophy.
I don't like it either. I want definitive. I want somebody to say it's 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
not 17 or 19? I don't know.
Or
Uh,
like maybe saying a principle that if both parties agree, or if like something like that.
no, if a
Because,
5-year-old agrees, we don't count that.
well, then we talk about homesteading, right? At
Same thing,
5-year-olds cannot homestead.
the
Is
same thing with,
homesteading also a continuum problem?
yes, certainly. How long do you have to homestead? How intensively do you have to put the plants when you're putting corn in there? Every square foot, every square yard, every acre, one plant per acre. How many years do you have to homestead? Murray Rothbard said, east of Mississippi, where the land is pretty fertile, a family of four has to homestead, I think, a year or two, 160 acres. West of the Mississippi, where the land is less fertile, a family of four, 1,600 acres. Now, where did he come up with 160 and 1,600? It's arbitrary. It's reasonable. I think 18 or 17 is a reasonable number for the age of consent. And 160 acres and 1,600 acres and a certain intensivity of the homesteading. Now, when we get to the moon or Mars, or even in the desert, you can have 16,000 acres. On the moon, maybe 16 square miles. I don't know, but there are continuums everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but there are continuums in homesteading. Sure, there are continuums all over the place. I wish there
How,
were.
yeah. How do we move libertarianism to reality? Like it's all good and beautiful in theory, and I agree with it, and many people do. But how do we make it happen?
We
And
got another
can you also mention the what's happening in Argentina now? Are
ah
they are
Malay.
they are they on the correct path? And
Javier Malay is magnificent. Javier Malay is an anarcho-capitalist. And then there are people like Hans Hoppe who are complaining about him because he's not doing as much as he should be doing. I think we should give Javier a little bit of a break because if Javier did too much, he would be deposed. I think he's doing as much as he can get away with it, pushing Argentina in a free market direction. So how do we promote liberty? We get another Ron Paul. Rand Paul is pretty good. We got another Ayn Rand. We got another Murray Rothbard. We got another Ludwig von Mises. Uh, and, and, uh, and we try to promote liberty by writing, by speaking, like what we're now doing, by writing a song, by a TV program like South Park, which is a very libertarian cartoon. So that's how we promote liberty. We start the Free State Project, where everyone moves to what is it, Vermont? No, New Hampshire. We have think tanks like the Mises Institute or the Reason or the Cato Institute. Every state in the U.S. has a think tank. In Louisiana, it's the Pelican Institute, which tries to promote liberty, and the Libertarian Party.
and is it achievable? Is it utopia or is it achievable? And to what extent is it achievable? This world
That's a
that we're describing.
that's a nasty question, and I hate you for asking it. Uh, I don't know if it's achievable or not, given human nature. Maybe in 100,000 years from now, maybe, but not right away, because the people that I see are very non-libertarian. I mean, what percentage of the vote does the Libertarian Party get? 1%, a half a percent, a quarter of a percent. Ron Paul might get 3 or 5%, but very small. So most people in the United States, which is a pretty libertarian place, are nowhere near being libertarian. So we've got a long way to go before we can have a libertarian society. But that's irrelevant.
And even like having one libertarian country, is it enough? Like, can it be fully libertarian in this world where other countries are not?
It could be, yeah, why not? I don't see why not. Argentina could be, the United States could be. Hong Kong at one time was very close. One of my books was rating the economic freedom of all the countries in the world, and Hong Kong was number one. Hong Kong was pretty libertarian, not perfect, but very, very libertarian. And Singapore came in second, and I think it was Switzerland came in third, and this is in the 1970s, and the US came in fourth. Now the US is 20th or 15th. So we've slipped a little, but it's possible to have one libertarian society. Why not? Monaco, Liechtenstein might be a good place to start. They're small.
Because when a country is interacting with other countries, like I think it's getting influenced by them in a way which I don't see. Like how do you go to United States when you're from Russia, let's say, and all roads are private, everything is private? How do you interact with that world? How do you live there?
That would be magnificent. One of my books is on privatizing the highways. And in the US, some 40,000 people every year die on the highways. Why? Because road socialism. If we had competing roads, like right now, the minimum speed on the road is 40 miles an hour and the maximum is 70. Maybe it would be better if the right lane, everyone had to do 55, and the middle lane, everyone had to do 70, and in the left lane, everyone had to do 85. Would this save lives? I don't know, but I might try that. And you might try 60, 70, and 80 on your road, and we'll see which ones save more lives.
Isn't the transition too costly? Not only in roads, but in every field regarding the libertarian philosophy.
Look, 40,000 people in the US die every year. I don't see why it would be costly. It would be cheaper. Private enterprise always is more efficient than government roads. So I don't think it would be costly. It would be a pain in the neck. I remember when Sweden, I think it was Sweden, went from driving on the left side of the road to the right side. And it took a whole year for them to do it. They would say, in a year from now, we're going to switch. And then every month or every week, and then when you got close, every day, every hour, they said, be careful, we're going to switch. Well, we could stay on the right side of the road.
Yeah, like when I'm saying costly, what I mean is, for example, you said 40,000 people die a year, right? So let's say the roads are private, and many of them try this different approach with right lane going 55, left lane, etc. And so in that case, theoretically speaking, let's say more than 40,000 people die. Let's say 60,000 people die. Or they try something else and then 80,000 people die. And then till you reach this perfect balance, till market regulates it.
That's a very good
So many
point.
people may die.
Well, all I can say is East Germany versus West Germany, North Korea versus South Korea, the same people, the same culture, the same language, the same IQ, the same everything. And one became capitalist and one became socialist. And we see where people were trying to leave and where they were trying to get to. The idea that right now 40,000 people die under road socialism. And if we had free enterprise, more people would die. Well, it's possible. It's not a logical contradiction, but I really doubt it. Look, why do we have pretty good paper clips? Why do we have pretty good, pens? Why do we have pretty good shirts? Why do we have pretty good eyeglasses? Because we have competition. Imagine if the government made all the eyeglasses or all the paper clips.
Yeah, that's true.
The government makes all the roads. Atar, I have to get off. I promised you an hour. But this was wonderful. And please, in a month or two, let's do it again and we'll talk about money.
Sure, I was gonna say that we should meet like every 2 or 3 months. It would be great.
But in 2 or 3 months, let's meet again and we can talk about gold and we can talk about anything else you want. I greatly enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.